you feeling? Oh, good. Yes, sure. I'll connect you to Lyman. Have a great day. Oh, hi. I'm sorry. I didn't see you come up. You see, I'm making brownies for you for your snacks later on over at the church. Pretty good. You know, one of these days, if I'm not careful, this headset's going to fall off and end up in the brownies. So be careful when you have those snacks over at the church. I probably really should have dressed up for y'all today. But you know, one of the nice things about being the operator here in Gilbert, this is also my home. So I get to just work and do my housework at the same time. So you know, I just scuff around in these old clothes. In fact, you know what? This old dress, it used to be a feed sack. In the 1940s, when there were cotton rations, they used to put the feed into printed feed sacks. So you could go and buy your feed, and then when you were done with it for that, you could reuse it and make dresses, shirts, curtains, table covers. We were so resourceful back in those days. I guess I probably should introduce myself. I'm Naomi Reinsch Askelson, and I am the operator here in town. But you know what? You probably didn't come to hear about me, did ya? Probably want to hear about this house. Well, you see, this house was moved here to Gilbert just a few years ago in the early 1950s by my family. Now, it was not the first phone operating building in the city. In fact, this street right here, I think you all refer to it as an alley now. It's Hall Street. And the first phone operator was down on the corner of Hall and Matthews Drive. Lucille Watson and Gerald Worth remember their mother being the phone operator. She was the operator from 1945 to 1950, and they remember sitting in there and helping her with the switchboard work she had to do. J.P. Zener was the first operator here in Gilbert. When the businesses and residents of Gilbert decided that they wanted phone service, they formed a cooperative. And they actually had to run their own lines and hook themselves up to the city of Ames to have phone service here. So that was 1903, and then 1904, J.P. Zener was hired to be the operator and run the company. Now, depending on how many subscribers Gilbert had to the phone service, that's how he was paid. He was paid $1.50 per subscriber per year. So in 1905, they finally decided they needed to have someone to help with the phone service and keep the lines in repair. So John Worth was hired to do that for many years. The cost of having phone service in those early years was probably a luxury, cost between $3 and $5 a year to have service. If you lived out in the townships, they were responsible, out in the country, they were responsible for the phone service. And so they started their own cooperatives and they hung their own lines, oftentimes hanging the phone lines from trees and fence posts and the like, whatever they could find. Now, out in the country, many of those farmers had phone service before they ever had electricity. So those phones were run by batteries, similar to this. And because they didn't have electricity and they didn't want to pay for a repairman, the farmers would take turns and go house to house to keep the phones in good repair and change out the batteries. So, before I continue rattling on about the phone service and myself, you probably want to know a little bit more about this house. It was actually moved here, as I told you, in the early 1950s. It began its life up northwest of town. I think there's some young buck up there by the name of Phil Worth. Up in that area is where this building started. It was a one-room schoolhouse. In fact, it was the Lafayette No. 2 schoolhouse. This is the Lafayette record book. And it goes from 1892 to 1904. And during those early years, there were a lot of teachers. Seemed like a new teacher every single year. It was hard work being a teacher for very little pay. Some of you probably know what that's like today. Well, some of those early teachers included Chase Robinson, Lizzie Smith, E.T. Shepard. He was one of the founders of our city. Alice Nelson was also a school teacher there. Back then, female teachers were not allowed to be married. And most of the teachers were female. You know, there were a few, though, that were able to keep it a secret. Bessie Gildersleeve. I'm sure you've heard that one before. They also were responsible to be the custodians of the school. They had to get there early, stoke the stove before the students got there to get it warmed up. Then once the students left, they had to stay late and clean up and do all that work. So not only were the teachers and the custodians, they also were responsible for all the disciplinary issues. So in a sorts, they were kind of the principal too. Now out in the township, those teachers, if they weren't from around here, they usually lived with the township superintendent, which was generally a farmer and his family. So let's take a look here in this book and see what a teacher had to say. Miss Belle Charlson was the teacher. It was 1903. She had 22 students ranging from age 5 to 17. Oh, some of those students back then, Mabel Hanson, George Shepard, Amelia Jacobson. She taught subjects such as grammar, arithmetic, numbers, government, history, a lot of the same things we do today. So when she would get ready to finish the year, she wrote a letter to the teacher who was going to be coming the next year, and that was pretty common. So what she writes here, she says, "You will find that student number 13 in the second reader class is further advanced than students number 14 and 15. You will also notice that most of the classes in grammar and arithmetic have not yet covered very much of their work. The reason for this is that I had to give the pupils a thorough review of their work that they had done last term. And I also gave them a great deal of board work." Now, the attendance of numbers 1 and 7 was very irregular. Therefore, they did poor work. Well, times haven't changed much in that way either, have they? Now, the pupils in primary class number 17 and 18, they have taken sick and had to leave school. So I hope you like your new school when you get here, and wishing you much success in the next school year. Yours respectfully, Belle Charlson. Now, she doesn't say much, but we do know that those two students that took ill were Agnes Jacobson, age 6, and Irene Soma, age 5. And she doesn't talk about what happened to them, but we do know that influenza ran rampant in those years. So we think that's probably what happened. Now, in 1917, Gilbert schools consolidated, and all of those one-room schoolhouses came into Gilbert, except for Lafayette Township. It got left out of the consolidation. So those schools remained open until the 1940s. And when they closed in the 1940s, those families up here northwest of town had the choice to go to Gilbert or to Story City. And at that time, that's kind of what drew those school boundaries. Oh, excuse me, I need to take a call. Yes, hello, Mrs. Dawson. Certainly, I'll put you through to the salon in Ames. Okay, thank you. Oh, Mrs. Dawson is off to get her hair done again. Oh, Mrs. Dawson, I'm so sorry. I forgot to disconnect. You know, I have 27 lines coming into this house. And in fact, when this house was remodeled in recent years, long after I was gone, they found this underground line coming in. And these were the phone lines coming in. Now, there were 27 lines. That sure looks like a lot more than 27 to me, but they tell me, and you know, I was never good at taking care of the phones, I just connected people. They tell me that 4 wires per phone line came in, so that's why there's so many there. So, the hub of any small town, guess what? It was the phone office. It's me, the operator. So if you want to know something and want to find out what's going on in town, just let me know. I can tell you. You know, it was really hard to have much privacy in a small town in those days. Still is. But back then there were party lines. Now in Gilbert there were usually 2 families per party line. Out in the country there were 8. And you had your own unique ring so you knew when to pick up. Now, just because you had your own unique ring didn't mean that nosy neighbors or well-intended neighbors wouldn't pick up on you. And the more people that picked up on that phone, the harder it was to hear. So sometimes you had to tell those well-intended neighbors to get off the phone. You know, there's still some stories that circulate in these parts, and again, this was long after me, but one of the stories I hear was about a young little kid, last name of Brown, and he had a neighbor by the name of Mr. Weirson. Mr. Weirson was a nice man, but he liked to talk on the phone. And those Brown kids would get fed up with him being on the phone all the time. So one day that little brown boy picked up the phone and said, "Mr. Weirson, get off the phone. I need to call the fire department. My parents aren't home." Well, Mr. Weirson got off the phone all right. He jumped straight in his car and drove down to the Browns to find Mrs. Brown at home, knowing nothing about her son's shenanigans. So it was pretty tough being a teenager on the party line. Didn't have much privacy. Like I said, in Gilbert it was a little bit better because there were only 2 parties per party line. Now, if it was somebody on your party line that you were calling, you could ring them up yourself with the old crank. But if it was on a different party line, you'd have to call me. And then I would put you through. So I knew who you were talking to, all right. So right here, I have the 1951 Gilbert phone directory. Now, one of those numbers that was frequently called here in Gilbert was the Joneses Sundry. I put a lot of calls through to the Joneses Sundry. That number is 23R2. So you call me and I'd put you through to 23R. So, excuse me, I do have another call coming in, but please tell my good friend Gunder hello at your next stop on up here at the home house. Yes, Mun Lumber. Yes, I'll put you through. That would be number 20. Thank you.